David Bowie and Alan Rickman. One of my favorite movies. Some of you youngins wouldn't even know. It was one of Alan Rickman's, one of his first movies. Truly, Madly, Deeply, a beautiful love story. And he was so young when he did it. And he's a leading man. He was cast as a leading man. All you youngins know him as Sirius Snape. But he was definitely a leading man. If you go back and watch this movie from the 1980s, it's all about love and karma and connection and, you know, what happens after we depart. It's really a moving movie. But here's the thing. I want to just say two things. I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about today, but I just want to, like, I thought it was so amazing what he said. I posted it on my Facebook. But some young actor asked him, well, what advice do you have for actors? And these are all the things that we talk about. These have been the big themes of my life. He says, I'm paraphrasing here and then talking specifically. He says, forget about acting. That's what he says to a young actor asking how to be an actor. And he says, forget about it. He says, it's cumulative. You go to art galleries, you form opinions, you have experiences. He says your imagination, which you develop, then has something to bounce off of. And then Charlie Rose, who was interviewing him, said you sort of develop your own uniqueness, which is what we learn here. Who you are is essentially, ultimately, finally, infinitely unique, and that's what you have that nobody else has. Your uniqueness isn't any more unique than anyone else's, but it is your card. And then he says the most important thing to develop is courage, courage, which comes from the French word meaning coeur, the heart. To have courage means to have heart. Gonna start crying? That's what it means. It means to have heart, kids. He says you have to be courageous with yourself on stage emotionally. Then he references someone I talk about in this book. He says Jill Bolte-Taylor, who's a neuroanatomist. Next time go around, oh, that's okay, come on in. He says she is talking about the analytical and imaginative side. And I mentioned her in this book because she is this woman a number of years ago who has a best-selling book and has a very popular TED Talk where she talks about this sort of bifurcation between the left and the right hemispheres of the brain because she had a stroke. And so she traveled whilst having a stroke between the left hemisphere saying, I am having a stroke, this does not compute, I need to call 911, to, oh my God, it feels good. And then, oh my God, I can't talk. And then, everything is okay, you are part of this consciousness field. And then crawling to get the phone. I mean, it's really horrifying and beautiful at the same time. Now she deals with brain science, and she talks about by stepping to the right of your left brain, so that means get into your right hemisphere, we can all uncover the feelings of well-being and peace that are so often sidelined by our own brain chatter. So here is Alan Rickman talking about how he stumbled upon this TED Talk of hers a few years ago, and he talks about the analytical and imaginative side, and he talks about how acting is a vehicle of you're using both sides of your brain. But then he talks about how you hand yourself over to the emotional demands of a role. And then he says, but there's this laser or something assessing what's happening out there and also for you in the work, which is what I'm always talking about, this left brain part. But then he says, but there's also so there's this left brain part that's assessing all things and also to the person you're talking to. And he says we're divided from the neck up. And he says, at one level, you know it's just a load of lies. You guys, acting is lying at one level, because unless you're schizophrenic, and I'm not making fun of anybody who is mentally challenged, you know you are stepping into an imaginative realm. However, he says, the rest of you does not know it's lying. That's what we're teaching, which is your system is hearing someone say, I love you, or I hate you, get out, or I want to marry you. And you have an emotional response. You are surrendered to an emotional experience. And then he goes on to say that's the punishing part of acting. Taking the rest of your body into this strange place it finds it hard to recover from. So if you are willing to be brave, which takes courage, which is of the heart, to be pulled asunder, to be cut in half by the experience you're having, you're going to do just fine. That's really all it is. And then David Bowie, which I think is so amazing, kind of speaks about this. It all dovetails into the same thing. He says, if I'm going to do something that could be provocative or artistically relevant, I have to be prepared to put myself in a place where I feel unsafe, not completely in control. Where have you heard that before? I have no fear of failure whatsoever, because often out of that uncertainty, something is salvaged. Something that is worthwhile comes about. There is no progress without failure, and each failure is a lesson learned. Here is the most important point. Unnecessary failures are the ones where an artist tries to second guess an audience's taste, and little comes out of that situation except a kind of inward humiliation. I'll put it more in acting terms. Your failures, your unnecessary failures, I won't even call them failures, your unnecessary missteps, where you doubt yourself, where you question if you're on the right path, where you lose your power, where you ask for permission, is when you go into an audition room and you're trying to second guess what it is you think these people want. They don't know what they want. I just had coffee with an executive who is, he's a producer at a very big film company, does many movies you would know. And we were laughing because I met him when I was in Europe in December. And he's like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And I think it's so amazing because he's that honest. We were talking about that's how creativity works. Is you're honest enough because you're trying to figure it out. And he says oftentimes when he's on set, people will come to him with questions and he'll be like, I don't know, but I'll figure out an answer for you. Or I'll get an answer for you. That's truth. That's real creativity. So what if we just this week, in all your endeavors, try to second guess yourself less, try to be more steadfast, and this is how I want to do it, this is what I want to say, this is what I stand for, this is of the heart, and let it be. Just let it be. Walk out of the room. You may not get the call back. Who cares? You may not get the job. Who cares? It's developing musculature.
I'd scream and I'd fight for you. You're better than money.